remember that Jesus was broken for us, how can we resent being broken for him? He did so much, didn't he? And what have we really given him? But only what he gave us in the first place. Weeks ago, in this series on brokenness, we talked about that woman who broke her perfume box open to anoint Jesus, and observed the reality that no doubt for some time on the woman herself hung the aroma, the scent of that perfume. And when we worship God and in brokenness abandon ourselves to him, not only does it offer him the praise he's worthy of, it makes us more pleasant to be around. The fragrance of worship is a beautiful fragrance. And if people don't find us pleasant to be around, maybe it's because we're not worshiping him enough. Maybe it's because we haven't allowed ourselves to be broken open for him. A lot of wonderful truth in the poetry of that song. Thank you very much. The series is entitled Biographies of the Broken. We spent a long time on introduction and then our first biography, and I'm going to try to move more quickly now through a few more biographies of people with flesh and blood, mother and father, most of them children, just like you and like me, that were used of God and experienced something that we call breaking. This crisis of surrender, this crisis of realizing I don't have what it takes, I need God, and a process, an ongoing development of learning that I need to not depend on myself, and when hard things hit me, it needs to make me depend on the Lord. It's interesting because as I'm working through these different biographies, what it seems like is with many of them, they start out what we might call at the top of the heap. I mean, Jacob was the favored son. It was prophesied that he would rule over his brother Esau. He was his mommy's favorite. He got the birthright and the blessing. He was an incredible sheep herder, and God blessed him with the breeding process such that he had these amazing, wealthy flocks. He was high flying, and God had to bring him low before he could use him. The man we'll begin studying today, likewise, you couldn't say that he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, but by the time he was, toddler-ish, he had a whole set of silverware. He was wealthy, well-educated, good-looking. Everything went his way. And set him up for a life of ease, success, pleasure, and power. But God brought him to a place of brokenness where all of that was lost. And you might think that when he was high-flying, when he had the looks and the power and the influence and the money, that then he could be used of God. Just like we sometimes think, if only I were a bigger person, I could be used of God. If only I had this position of influence, then my life would matter. No, this individual had to be stripped of all of those things. And then God used him like few other people in human history. He's one of my favorite characters to study in the Bible, and I'm going to have to really work hard not to go into lots of rabbit trails because his life is so full of instruction for us. And the man's name is Moses. Please turn to Exodus chapter 2. The historical setting of Exodus 2 is that the descendants of Israel, or Jacob, the man that we studied recently, have multiplied exceedingly because of a famine in their homeland in Canaan. They moved down to Egypt where there was grain because God had used Joseph to wisely set aside grain in times of plenty. So they moved there of their free will as a large family, a small clan, whatever you want to call it, and they multiplied. Well, as the rulers came and went over the course of 4 centuries in Egypt, they noticed that this minority is becoming a very large minority. This other nationality within the envelope of our national bounds is becoming bigger and stronger than we, the native inhabitants of Egypt. we better suppress and control them, or they may take over our culture. And so the descendants of Jacob were made to be slaves in the land of Egypt. And for 400 years, roughly, they were there, and it was not so good. It got so bad that even under the oppression, the Pharaoh, the ruler of the day, was concerned that they were still multiplying, and he put a ban on baby boys and said they had to be killed at birth. Naturally, the parents didn't like that, and one particular set of parents did something about it. Exodus chapter 2 records that Amram and Jockabed saved their baby as long as they could because they saw he was special. He was a good-looking baby. Then when he couldn't be hid any longer, they kind of committed him to the Lord. I don't know everything that was in their heart, but they wove a basket boat and had their little girl put him on the Nile River and wait to see what would happen. And as God would work it in his providence, the daughter of the Pharaoh came to the Nile and found the little basket and was moved with compassion. Look at verse 6 of Exodus 2. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. Ladies, you have a hard time with a crying baby. You want to pick it up and soothe it, right? I shouldn't say it. Pick him or her up and soothe the child. And it says she had compassion on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." She knew right away what was going on. My dad has ordered the death of all of these, and some poor family has tried to make an escape way for their child. And her heart was filled with compassion. Now, the book of Acts tells us that Moses was, quote, exceeding fair. So he's a beautiful baby. He's a Hebrew baby. And Pharaoh's daughter kind of takes to him. Now, Moses' little sister big sister had been hanging around. And in verse 7, then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? I know you're a princess and royalty, and you don't have time for all this work, and not to mention the diaper changing. So I can get a Hebrew to do this." Wink, wink. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, I think with a twinkle in her eye, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages." Wouldn't you like to get paid to take care of your own children? I mean, you got to pay babysitters. Why don't you get paid for it? I don't know. And so Pharaoh's daughter paid Moses' mom to take care of him. And the woman took the child and nursed it. Verse 10, and the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he, Moses, became her, Pharaoh's daughter's son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, because I drew him out of the water. So notice some chronological markers here. She had the baby when it was young, and then I think he was around 3 years old. He comes into Pharaoh's palace. He grows in verse 10. Notice a big time lapse to verse 11. And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, as in adult. Again, when we cross-reference this with other passages, we're going to find out that he's actually 40 years old by the time we get to verse 11 and 12. So he goes from being just a young child, a toddler even, in verse 9 and 10, to being an adult, 40 years old in verse 11. It came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens. And he spied an Egyptian smiting an Hebrew, one of his brethren. Now, before we read the next verse, I'm going to refer to Acts 7 a few times, and let me explain why. In Acts chapter 7, Stephen, one of the first servants of the first church, is about to be executed for Jesus Christ. And he stands in front of the court, if you will, the Sanhedrin, and they've accused him about changing the traditions of Moses and defiling the temple. And so in his long sermon, Acts chapter 7, he spends a long time talking about Moses, and then he talks about Solomon, who built the temple. And so in Stephen's sermon, he tells us a lot about Moses. Some of it adds details that are not found in the Exodus account. So whenever you read the early chapters of Exodus, you got to read also Acts chapter 7. And then it's also fun to turn over to Hebrews 11, which tells us about Moses' story as well. When we read Acts 7, Stephen preaches and he says that Moses, when he did what he's about to do in these next verses, he thought that his people would understand that God had sent him to be a deliverer. That's not worded exactly that way in Exodus. It's not a contradiction. It's just a detail that's not there. And so we understand that Moses had a mindset when he went out and did what he was about to do. Moses truly believed that God had raised him up, quote, for such a time as this, though this was hundreds of years before Esther. He believed that he was going to be the one that was going to set his people free. He's 40 years old. He knows he's a Hebrew. He knows those are his people. And day after year after decade, he's watched his people oppressed by the taskmasters of Egypt. And he's educated. It says in Acts 7 that he had all the wisdom of the Egyptians. It says that he was a very goodly man. We know that he's strong because of what he's about to do. So this guy is the ideal candidate to start a revolution and to set the people free. He's strong, he's good looking, he's well educated. He is the prime time candidate to be a leader for the people of Israel. And he comes out and he sees this. And it's almost as if something went off inside and he thinks, my moment has come. He believed that the brothers, the Israelites, would understand God had prepared him to be a deliverer. And now I'm going to start doing some delivering. Can you just sense the excitement and the emotion and the passion welling up inside of him? It said in verse 11 that he looked on their burdens and he saw an Egyptian smiting in Hebrew. Do you think that's the first time he'd seen that? I don't think so. But he wasn't going to take it anymore. Verse 12. And he looked this way. And he looked that way. And when he saw that there was no man, at least that's what he thought, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the second day, behold, two men of the Hebrews strove together. Two of his own nation were fighting. And he said to him that did the wrong, wherefore smitest thou thy fellow? Now, before we move on, I want us to see a little bit of what's in Moses' mind here. Notice that he is very much trusting his own timing here, isn't he? He went out, he saw a problem, I'm going to fix it right now. He used his own strength. I don't know if he had a spear or a sword or if he was just using his bare hands in hand-to-hand combat. But with his own physical strength, he killed this other soldier, this taskmaster, one-on-one. He relied on his own strength. He trusted in his own timing, and he covered his own back. Did you see him covering his back, covering his tracks? He buried the dead body in the sand after looking both ways to make sure that nobody saw. Do you see how self-reliant Moses is at this point? His own timing, his own strength, his own cover-up. And I believe that he thought he was on a good start for success. Why? Because the next verse says he went out the second day, and it's like he's like, well, that went pretty well. Wonder what mission I have today. I delivered a Hebrew from an Egyptian. Now there's two Hebrews fighting. I can fix this too. I think in his own mind he was successful. Because if he had been convicted that what he did was wrong, that he wasn't following God's way and God's timing and God's power, I don't think he would have gone out the next day trying to solve more things. I think he thought he was successful. I wonder how many times that's me. That went pretty well. Wonder what I'll fix next as the redeemer of my people. And I think I've done something well, but I haven't actually. And so Moses goes out the second day thinking that he's going to fix more problems. And he says, wherefore smitest thou thy brother? I'm going to take care of this problem. Verse 14. And he, the one that Moses was trying to stop, said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? By the way, was Moses a prince? Yes. Was he over them? Yes. Does this Hebrew man like it? No. He probably viewed him as a traitor. You're one of us, but you're living in your palace eating grapes while we're out here building who knows what. Who made thou a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killest the Egyptian? And Moses feared. He went from being the hero to being the hunted, from being the one who was going to set everything straight to the one who would have to run. He said, surely this thing is known. And when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. Moses was right to be afraid. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Why was Moses running away? I think 2 reasons. The obvious one is that he was afraid. Moses was going to kill him, or Pharaoh wanted to kill him, and Moses knew that was probably what was going to happen. But also, I think it's because Moses felt rejected. Remember what Stephen said in his sermon in Acts 7. Moses believed that he was going to be a deliverer. And on day 2 of his big deliverance, his fellow countrymen said, who made thee a prince and a judge over us? We don't need you. We don't want you. Leave us alone. And right there, his hopes and dreams of being a redeemer and of being used greatly were crushed. He's afraid. He knows there's a price on his head. And the people he wanted to help don't want him anyways. And like a puppy with his tail between his legs, he goes running out into the desert. I wonder how many times have we, normal human beings, thought we could fix some situation, thought we could take care of a problem, and ended up finding that we weren't equal to the problem, and then people didn't want our help anyways. His scheme wasn't successful. His strength was insufficient. He thought they would understand, but they didn't. Verse 16, the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. That was their job. That was what they normally did. We're told this because they did it apparently at the well where Moses finally sat down. He had been running away for a long distance from Egypt. He finally takes a break at this well where the 7 daughters of Jethro normally watered their dad's flocks. Verse 17, the problem was the shepherds, other probably men shepherds, came and drove them, the 7 daughters, away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. As I thought about this, it's interesting because Moses still has a heart to help, doesn't he? He tried to help that first Hebrew that was being oppressed by the Egyptian. And then he tried to help the second Hebrew who was being oppressed by another Hebrew. And now he's trying to help these damsels in distress, these ladies who can't get their flocks to water because of the bully shepherds that are there. And he stands up to help them. But from every indication, though he's still inclined to help people, he still seems to be relying on his own resources. Again, there's evidence here that Moses was, in fact, one of those people that you would look at as a deliverer and a leader because he single-handedly drives them all off. So I don't know how many shepherds normally made the girls go running, but Moses stands up and all the bad guys go running. So he must have been impressive to some degree. Point number 1, if you're taking notes, is this. It's about unbroken Moses because that's the pattern. We start out unbroken. Unbroken Moses operated on his own schedule using his own strength. That's the pattern. He was going to use his strength to help the first Hebrew, his strength to help the second Hebrew, and his strength to help the ladies, the daughters of Jethro. And he wanted to do it on his own schedule. Was it wrong for him to want to help his brethren? No, God was going to use him for that. But was his timing right? No. Do you sometimes think, well, this is what needs to happen and this is when it needs to happen? And this is what I have to do to make it happen when it should happen. That's Moses thinking. If you have your heart set on, this is exactly the chronology, and these are the means, be careful. That's what unbroken Moses was like. Unbroken Moses operated on his own schedule using his own strength and failed. Please understand that. When you are dependent on your own strength and when you are dogmatically committed to your own schedule, it's likely that you'll fail. I'm thinking of our congregation in very simple, broad terms today. I'm going to split us in half. I'm going to let you decide which half you're in, okay? And this is touchy, and I don't want to make anybody angry because I'm a sensitive soul. I'm going to talk to the younger people and the older people, okay? So you just decide which one of those you are, okay? And probably if you're in this congregation, there's somebody in the congregation, okay? Let me talk to the younger people first of all. Younger people, are you committed to your map for what this week is going to hold? I have it all drawn out and scheduled out. This is what I'm going to do and where I'm going to go and how I'm going to do it. Younger people, have you mapped out your year, maybe even your life? Saying, God, by this year I'm doing this, and on schedule this is going to happen, on schedule this is going to happen. This is my life. God, sign here. Is that your attitude? Are you committed to your schedule like Moses was? If so, I would suggest that you're not as broken as you should be. By the way, isn't it sometimes what we do that we will realize that and we'll surrender to God, and then a little bit later, we take the pen and start writing again? This is a continual resurrendering process, isn't it? Where we can sing, "My life, Lord, is yours to control." And then we realize, oh, I've kind of taken the reins again, haven't I? Oh, no, I got to let go. Younger people, are you chiseling in granite what you think your life should be? Or are you just kind of sketching with a pencil and leaving the eraser in God's hand? Older people, are you frustrated because things haven't gone according to your plan? You had a dream, you had a plan, you had goals, and reality has been a little bit different. Are you kind of frustrated by that? Are you fuming and just, God, this isn't what we had planned? And he's saying, it's what I had planned. Regardless of your age or stage of life, we all need to come to that point where we can say, it's yours, God. It's all yours. Moses was committed to his schedule and his strength, and if we are like him, unbroken. I'm thankful to say that Moses didn't stay there. We'll pick up the text in verse 18. It might throw you off here. The name Reuel is another name for the same man we usually call Jethro, so don't be confused by that. Exodus 2:18. And when they, this is Jethro's daughters, when they came to Reuel their father, he said, how is it that ye are come so soon today? Like, wow, you guys are back early from work. What did they get up? What's the deal? And they said, now there's 7 daughters, and I'm wondering, when it says, and they said, what that sounded like. I now have all 4 of my children home again, and it is a rare moment when there are not at least 2 voices speaking in our house. There's 7 of us now, and you's with us, and so with 7 people, there's often more than one that wants to speak. And these are 7 daughters, and they tell him, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds, and also drew water enough for us. I told you he was strong. And watered the flock. Now, I have to stop here. It is a little humorous, and we sometimes need that. But you know, if there's anybody that wants to meet a nice young man more than a nice young woman, it's a man with 7 daughters. And Jethro is an opportunist. Look what he says in verse 20, and try to hear the tone of his voice. And he said unto his daughters, and where is he? Why is it that ye have left the man? Call him that he may eat bread. He almost got away. And Moses was content to dwell with the man. And Jethro gave Moses Zipporah, his daughter. Well, one's better than none, right? And she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom, for Moses said, I have been a stranger or a foreigner in a strange foreign land. This is not the end of Moses' brokenness. We've said before, brokenness is a crisis and a process. But I think this is the crisis of Moses' brokenness. When at 40 years of age, when he tries to make his big entrance, he flops, runs away, and now he's content to marry the daughter of a shepherd and hang out in the wilderness for another 40 years. It says in verse 21, Moses was content to dwell with him. This is probably a nomadic shepherding family. They probably lived in tents. Where had Moses spent the last, 37 years of his life? In palaces. What had he eaten there? Well, at least leeks and onions, we know that. And probably a lot of really good stuff. Now, he got what he got. What kind of work did Moses do in Egypt, probably? I'm guessing fairly comfortable jobs. And now, he does whatever the flocks need to have done. And Moses was content. His dreams of being a deliverer have been dashed. And now, he's content to have a meek and lowly role. He's satisfied with simplicity, and he had to accept being alone. Notice what he named his son, Gershom. I'm a stranger in a strange place. That's another way of saying, I'm alone. Most of my life, I've been separated from my family. Now I'm even as separated from my homeland and my adopted family. I'm with this guy, Jethro, in the wilderness. I'm a stranger. God often uses times of being alone, times of doing simple things, as a growth time. When we're broken and willing to sit alone, when we have been dethroned from our own imagination of what God's going to do with us, when we're content with the simple, then God can really use us. And so Acts 7:30 tells us that he's in this season for another 40 years. Here's point number 2 in our study of Moses. We saw, first of all, that Moses, unbroken, operated in his own schedule using his own strength, and he failed. And now we see that God used rejection and failure, followed by obscurity and isolation to break Moses. Do you object to being obscure? I want my name in lights. I want the promotion. I want a business named after me. I want everybody to know who I am. I don't want to have to introduce myself. People should know my name. Are you content to be obscure and unknown and behind the scenes? Not just because it's comfortable for you and you're shy, but because people really don't care about you. Moses was obscure. Nobody in Egypt cared about him. Are you afraid to be alone? Do you have to have people around you at all times? Do you have to have people telling you how wise you are, how smart you are, how good you are, how much they like being with you, and how you're their favorite person? Do you feed on the frothy praise of others? Or are you able to just sit in the desert alone, content? God used this time to break and to rebuild Moses. Remember from Jeremiah what God told Baruch, seekest thou great things for thyself? Seek them not. One of the problems, I think, in our culture is that we teach our children that they should seek to be the extreme of something. You can't just enjoy this sport for a hobby. You need to plan to be a professional athlete. You can't just do your best in school because it's right to do your best and develop yourself. You need to do your best in school so you can get into some Ivy League school and get a high-paying job and, get corrupt and retire early and go to jail. And we teach our kids that greatness is the goal. It's not. Being faithful is the goal. Being obedient, loving God, knowing Him, that's the goal. Jesus Himself warned against this in Luke 14, verse 8 through 11. He's at a banquet, and He tells them, by the way, when you go to banquets, don't try to sit at the head table. You go sit in a low place, and maybe the host will say, oh, come sit up higher. You don't want to sit high and be told to go low. Someone's put it this way, in God's economy, the way up is the way down. Are you willing to be humble and lowly, to be anonymous, to be insignificant? Do you need to be a deliverer with a title and a brass band playing? Are you satisfied to be a shepherd, doing simple, lonely tasks all by yourself? You know, doing those is a great new way to get to know God. Because really, when you have the brass band playing, it's a little bit hard to hear God, isn't it? After all, it was alone in the wilderness that Moses saw the burning bush, wasn't it? You can get all the accolades and acclaim, you can garner the awards and the prestige and never encounter God. Or you can trudge along in paths unknown and hear the voice of God. By the way, it's interesting, isn't it? Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness providing direction, food, and water to a whole bunch of simple creatures. And after the Exodus, he spent 40 years providing direction, food, and water to a bunch of mouthy, simple creatures. Do you see how this time in the desert was a preparation for doing something really great for God? I don't think it's a coincidence. Turn now to Exodus chapter 3. In this encounter, when Moses sees God in the burning bush, God introduces himself in verse 6, and he says, Moreover, he said, I am the God of thy father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. Oh, the irony that just a short time later he would say, show me thy glory. Verse 11, and Moses said unto God, who am I, that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? Do you see the change? Earlier he said, I thought that my brothers would know that I'm going to be the deliverer. Now God says, hey Moses, you're going to be the deliverer. And he says, who am I? Not me. I'm just a shepherd. You need somebody else. I'm moving quickly for time's sake. Chapter 4 now, verse 1. As Moses goes back and forth with God, protesting that he can't do it, I would say in a mixed motive of some humility and some stubbornness, to the point that eventually God is upset with him for his slowness to obey. I think it started in humility, but ended in stubbornness. Chapter 4, verse 1, Moses answered and said, but behold, they will not believe me, nor hearken unto my voice, for they will say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee. So in verse 11 of chapter 3, he says, who am I? In chapter 4, verse 1, he says, they're not going to listen to me. And then chapter 4, verse 10. Chapter 4, verse 10, Moses said unto the Lord, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither heretofore nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but am slow of speech and of a slow tongue. This is a bit of a conundrum because Acts chapter 7 says he was mighty in word and deed. Acts chapter 7 said he had learned all the wisdom of the Egyptians. He'd been well trained. So we're left wondering, what do you mean, Moses, when you say, I'm not eloquent now and I wasn't earlier? Does that mean that he really wasn't good at speaking? God never says, oh, yes, you are. God allows Aaron to speak for him. I don't know. Maybe it means that when he was at the pinnacle of his education, he was quite the polished speaker, but in 40 years of talking to sheep, he'd kind of lost his touch. I don't know. Maybe it's just that now Moses didn't think so much of himself. And he says, I'm not eloquent. There's more eloquent people than me. I'm not sure all that was in his heart, but he said, who am I? He said, they will not believe me. And he said, I am not eloquent. Moses, at this point, as a broken man, is well aware of his inadequacies. He is about to face down the most powerful man in that whole region of the world. But he says, who am I? Nobody but listens to me, and I'm not very good at this anyways. How about you? I'm not talking about some kind of self-deprecating false humility where you say, I can't do anything right, just so people will say, yes, you can. You're not fishing for compliments, but you actually believe, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not smart enough. There are others better qualified than me. Have you come to that point, or do you still think you're the deliverer? I hope that God has helped us all to be broken of our own strength, of our own sufficiency, and get to that point where we don't believe in ourselves. And if you wanted to get stickers or something to hang from your car mirror, there's a lot of decorations that will say things like, believe in yourself. Moses didn't. He turned out okay. One more verse here, verse 13. This is a confusing part of the dialogue, but Moses and God are going back and forth, back and forth. I can use you. I'm not good enough. I want to use you. I'm not good enough. And then finally in verse 13, Moses said, oh, my Lord, send, I pray thee by the hand of whom thou wilt send. It seems that at this point he's willing to accept help, and God chooses Aaron, his older brother, to help him. So as we see Moses broken, he does not believe in himself. He's aware of his inadequacy, and he's willing to accept help. Are you? Are you broken enough yet? Are you still doing it on your own and think you've got what it takes? Things begin to change. Aaron does partner with him. Drop down, please, to verse 29. Exodus 4:29. Moses is going to say goodbye to Jethro. He's going to meet up with Aaron. They're going to make the trip back to Egypt. 4:29, and Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders of the children of Israel. In other words, they did what God had told them to do. And then go to chapter 7, please, verse 6. Chapter 7, verse 6. And Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded them, so did they. And then he goes and he appears before Pharaoh, and the pattern becomes that whatever God tells Moses to do, whatever God tells Moses to say, that's what he does. And at first, it goes from bad to worse, doesn't it? But he continues to say and do whatever God told him to do. So that when we get all the way to Exodus chapter 40, when the temple is finally constructed and put up, I love the way it's described there. Exodus 40:16, thus did Moses according to all that the Lord commanded him, so did he. That had become the new pattern of Moses' life. Instead of trying to do it on his own, instead of trying to say, I'm not good enough, he's like, I don't know, I'll just do whatever God says. If he says, go tell Pharaoh about the frogs, I'll go tell Pharaoh about the frogs. Even though he told me that God is going to harden his heart and he's not going to listen. If he says, hold your stick up over the Red Sea, I'll hold my stick up over the Red Sea. If he says, build me a tabernacle and make it exactly like this, then that's what I'll do. Broken people are useful to God because they obey. They've given up on their own plans and their own strengths and idea, and they're just listening and obeying. So that's point number 3. Broken Moses faithfully did what God said. That's it. And I think that's all he wants from you. He's not asking you to storm the gates of some capital and accomplish great things. He just wants you to be faithful doing what's right. What's in front of you? He said to Moses, what is that in thine hand? And it was a stick. What's in your hand? Is it a keyboard because you have an office job? Is it a steering wheel because you're a driver? Is it a teacher's pointer because you work in front of a blackboard? What is it that's in front of you? Do that thing faithfully, obediently to God, and he will use you. Broken Moses faithfully did what God said and was mightily used of the Lord. He brought the 10 plagues. He parted the Red Sea. And God did an amazing thing. You can read about it all through the book of Exodus, numbers. But none of that happened until he was broken. So let me come back to our questions. Do you object to being overlooked? To being obscure? Are you trying to make a name for yourself? Do you need people to acknowledge you? Look at me, look at me. Sometimes it's evidence just in group conversations when someone is always turning the conversation back to themselves and what they did and how hard their life is and how great their accomplishment is. That's not being obscure. Are you content to be alone? Fill your life with busyness and noise. Have you given up on your strength and your schedule? And are you willing to just say, God, I blew it. Whatever you say, that's what I'll do. I thought that, killing the Egyptian and burying his body was a pretty good start. But if you want me to go turn my stick into a snake, that's what I'll do. Absolute, complete surrender. That's what brokenness yields. Unbroken Moses operated in his own schedule, using his own strength, and failed. God used rejection and failure, followed by obscurity and isolation, to break Moses. Broken Moses faithfully did what God said and was mightily used. Let's, by God's grace, see if we can't shorten that 40-year breaking process. And let's surrender to him now. Look, if you're chafing at the schedule of your life and not getting what you thought you were going to get, just relax. Let God be God. If you're younger and you're in the plan-making process and you're writing it all out, hey, it's good to plan. It's good to think ahead. But trust the Lord. And don't be too adamant about what you're going to do with yourself. If you're alone, don't fret. God might be equipping you for something very, very special. And if all you get is a burning bush and a close experience with God, that'd be enough, wouldn't it? Let's surrender to being content with being unknown and small. Let's be humble enough to say, watch and see what God will do. And maybe, just maybe, he'll split the Red Sea again. Would you pray with me and stand? Lord, I have need of these truths. Help me to really believe and live them. Help me to see you high and lifted up and know just a little bit more of how small I am. Help each of us to be content with the life you have for us and not to seek great things for ourselves. Help us even when we do good things, not to do it in our own strength and our own schedule and force it, but to wait on your timing and cooperate with your means. Lord, I don't know what you're breaking each person here from, but I pray that you'll help us to let go and rest in you. Lord, if someone's in the vice right now and they're being broken, give them grace and peace. Help them to rest in you in the process.